Todd Peterson.
Todd Peterson is here, also remotely.
Thank you, Todd. Miss Yvette Williams. We got a third person there, but, okay. All right, Miss Yvette Williams is absent currently. She said she will try to pop in if possible. Okay, we are going to move on. Let's all please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Miss Yvette Williams, roll call.
Yes.
Great.
Here, can you hear?
How's the water?
Thank you for joining us while you're on a cruise ship. Awesome.
Thank you. I wasn't sure I would be able to, so I was quite surprised. They have Skylink now, Elon Musk's new system, satellite,
Uh-oh.
and it works very good. So
Nice. Okay.
I'm able to join. You can hear me okay?
Yes, just fine. Just fine.
Great. Thank you.
All right. We're moving now on to 1.02, adoption of the agenda. Let you guys get a minute to review it, and I will hold out for a motion.
Chad Conrad, I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion on the floor by Chad.
Rob Gertison, second.
I have a second from Rob Gerson. Anything on the question? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Moving on to 2.01, approval of the minutes. We'll give you guys a few minutes to review.
Approval of the amendments, Dave Flat for the record.
I have a motion by Mr. David Flats,
Abraham Camejo, I second that motion.
and also a second from Mr. Abraham Camejo. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Hearing none, motion passes. Is there any public comment when it comes to approval of the minutes? Just to double check. None. Okay, well, now we're moving on to 2.02, reports of the chair or liaison representatives. Okay, we're going to start off by Mr. Chad Conrad, Finance Investment.
Nothing to report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Mr. Abraham Camejo with Construction.
Regarding construction, there was a meeting with the library district regarding Lundry Elementary School. The trustees are going to continue to meet regarding that topic. So I just wanted to mention that there was that meeting with the district, with the library district regarding those talks, and that's all I have to do, have to say for that report.
Thank you, Abraham. Moving on to Mr. Robert Gertison, Design.
Nothing to report for design at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Mr. David Flatt.
Nothing to report this month.
Okay, Mr. Matt DeFalco, Site Selection Land Use.
Thank you. Nothing to report as well.
Thank you, Mr. DeFalco. Ms. Gina Blackman Taylor, Community Relations.
This is Gina Blackman, Taylor, for the record. When it comes to community relations, part of that is also the talking about the government relations, and I thought this might be a time to bring up the meeting that the Board of Trustees had, that both Mr. Cameo and Mr. Lopez provided public comment on. The discussion point was, the conversation was regarding committees and actually downsizing the number of committees that are on the Board of School Trustees item list. The conversation ended up revolving more around whether or not Board of School Trustees have time to serve on all of these different boards, but I believe the heart of the conversation was regarding the existence of these boards, just plain overall. So just in awareness for the committee and for the public that one of the items that they are discussing that they have pushed until the new Board of Trustees starts, but is whether or not various non-law required committees will continue to exist, or whether or not the Board of School Trustees provided information and their interaction with staff is enough to cover those topics. And then I don't know if you want to talk about, well, when we get to the liaison role, but that's just an update from the community side.
Okay, moving on to 2.03, report by the Clark County Board of School Trustees Liaison, Ms. Lola Brooks. She has informed us that she's got issues going on personally and professionally that she will not be attending likely for the rest of the term. So I don't think there's anybody present other than Ms. Lola Brooks in this meeting. Is there anybody remotely possibly? Just double checking to make sure we don't have a trustee that we could be discussing issues with. Hearing none. So Gina, do you want to add anything to that from what Ms. Lola Brooks informed us of?
No, none. I mean, just at this time that she would, that we would be getting a new representative in January once everyone was sworn in. If they decide to maintain this committee and have a Board of School Trustees representative to the Bond Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Gina. All right. Is there any public comment when it comes to 2.03? Seeing none, moving on to 2.04, Facility Master Plan Introduction. Mr. Brandon McLaughlin, the floor is all yours, sir.
Good morning, members of the committee. Brandon McLaughlin, Assistant Superintendent of the Construction Development Division, for the record. I have the privilege of introducing one of our partners that has recently come on in supporting the district's effort with this, but a high-level overview of what we're going to go through today. A facility master plan was something we presented in the CIP Revision 6 proposed recommendation back in June. This was a way to how do we more equitably distribute the capital dollars or limited capital dollars we do have available to us. I think the big crux of it was a $3.7 billion capital campaign in 2021. Due to construction cost escalation, was now forecasting about $5.3 million. So there was a $1.6 million delta. It would be easy to take the bottom of the list and say those were not as high priority, but I think that was a misled thing that we tried to address within that revision recommendation to you guys at the time. So in lieu of that, we were proposing to do a facility master plan of how do we have a more robust dialogue that with a few opportunities presented in front of us, including construction cost escalation as well as decreasing enrollment and a desire to be a lot more collaborative with our municipal and development partners. The facility master plan presented a great opportunity, especially with a lot of change going on around the district, that how could we have a facility master plan and utilize our physical assets in a more meaningful and strategic way. So Canon Design was solicited and submitted and was ultimately awarded the contract for facility master plan effort. And so The deck presented here today is merely a high-level overview of what their scope is, some of the things they're going to be looking at, as well as some of their interactions with various groups within and external to the district, as well as some of their engagement with the community at large. So with that, I'll introduce Mr. Paul Mills with Cannon Design.
Excellent. Chair Lopez, members of the committee, both in present and virtual. It's a distinct pleasure to work with you today. My name is Paul Mills with Cannon Design. I've committed my career to working with what you guys care about, and that's public education, working with large, urban, complex school districts around the country. I know you guys are big, and I know big. I've worked with entire states, dealing with the state of Louisiana, the state of Massachusetts twice, the state of Hawaii twice. And my calling card is working with large, complex systems that have not just technical challenges with buildings, but also complex issues relative to inequities that are baked into the fabric of the educational infrastructure of communities. And I take to heart very seriously the impact of this type of work and how it has on the prospects of the future generations of students. I'm not alone. I've got an amazing team that works with this type of work, and then speak a bit about the process and timeline. So really, this is about inequities. We have studied the circumstances, and we're getting right now our hands very deep into the data. But our preliminary findings, you can see some visualizations. If you like data at all, we're going to get along great, because we're going to be sharing with you a lot of analytics, and that's interwoven throughout our process. What you see here is a timeline of square feet of construction built over time, right? And they're color coding for different eras of construction. And you can see the relative proportion of those square feet as they relate to the entire system and where they exist on the map. So some things that are circled there in blue really highlights the fact that still in use today are many buildings that date back even as far as the 1930s, but those red and orange areas are facilities that are not like we build today. You build amazing new schools in your very active capital program. However, there are students in your communities that are attending these schools that go way back to the 50s and 60s in a different mode of instruction. And these inequities are things that we aspire through this type of proactive planning process to close the gaps on. There's other purposes and circumstances behind this that we're aware of. What you see here is a matrix heat map, if you will, of students in charter schools within your community. The rows represent kindergarten up through 12th grade, going from bottom to the top and from left to right each and every year. The gross total of students within each year and cohort are color-coded. The bluer means the smaller and the oranger the larger. And clearly, your charter schools have been growing over the last 20 years significantly. They went virtually from 0 up to 65,000 over a couple of decades. This is looking at the non-charter schools within your system. While you have been growing for decades, just like they have for many years, it's a reflection of the growth in your community. However, a couple of things point out in this data. You have your largest cohorts of students within non-charter schools in your system that are in high school now, and they're graduating out. Beneath them, you see in that lower blue area are much smaller cohorts, which means, and this might sound even unthinkable in recent years, that Clark County School District is actually poised to see some decline of enrollment after decades of year in and year out growth. And that's a great opportunity to think strategically, take stock of things, and look at opportunities to realign your capital investments in ways that can achieve double, triple bottom line benefits to the students and close those equity gaps that we're referring to. As a companion to that, we'll be looking at the capacity of the buildings and how well utilized they are. This graphic here shows gray that represents capacity that's filled, and red where there's a shortage of capacity, and blue where there's surplus capacity in the existing stock of schools. So you can see them on the map for elementary and middle and high school. That in high school we do have, and we know that your capital plan includes the opening of new exciting facilities in the space of magnet schools for career tech, as well as relief in some of those communities to relieve that crowding. And we have a couple of pockets at the elementary and middle that you do have some growth to still address, but by and large, there's a lot of surplus capacity in the area, which creates opportunities to rethink what the future might be, not just looking back at the way things have always been, but perhaps a future that's a trade-up scenario and opportunity for students, not just with the buildings themselves, but with the programs and offerings and opportunities for those students. And that's what this is about. This is about opportunity. We'll be doing this study over the next 13, 14 months, working closely with the district, with the communities, and we appreciate the opportunity and come to you with a great sense of responsibility of our role in facilitating these conversations, and our pledge is to keep you informed throughout this process. So the scope of the work, it's a facility master plan, so those words conjure what it might be, and it's definitely about capital projects, which is really your charge, is to oversee all that sort of work. That's the roadmap for the types of projects, the scoping of them, the budgeting and timing, prioritization of them. That's fundamental, but underpinning all that is a lot more. Very comprehensive view of the educational vision and taking stock of where the future wants to go for opportunities for students. We're looking at the condition of the buildings, the educational adequacy, meaning how well suited those older buildings are compared to what you build today as a common yardstick. Looking at equity and making sure that we're taking every opportunity to close gaps to opportunity, as well as looking at the capacity, as I suggested, as well as having these conversations in broad daylight transparently with the various diverse communities of Clark County. So we referenced a facility equity rubric, or educational adequacy, it's sometimes called. We have a way of benchmarking all of the facilities in a way that's subjective and consistent. We take it to a different level, though. We have different categories of things that you can see here on the right-hand side with subcategories that represent KPIs. We have a lot of data we can use to benchmark and understand where there are strengths and weaknesses among all your facilities. We take it to another level. We've been doing kind of the left-hand side. When I say we as an industry, we've been measuring using common standards and having the floor of what minimum standards ought to be in every school for decades. That's been done, at least to my knowledge, since the 90s in an objective way. What we like to do is take it a step further and acknowledge the fact that not every student, not every school, and not every community has the same needs. And to use just a minimum standard that's universal, we can evolve this from a place where we're achieving equality and really achieve equity. We'll also look at mapping all of the types of educational programs that exist using dashboards like this. This is a project we did with Baltimore County a couple of years ago, and we're able to look at where the different pathways and opportunities for career tech existed geographically. And if you're at all plugged into career tech, those are very difficult programs to staff. The people that teach in career tech can probably make multiples of their salary working out in the private sector. And where those programs are offered are largely the circumstance of where the talent that is magnanimous with their time and their commitments to public education and where they happen to be teaching at the time. Well, in Baltimore, we discovered that and learned that the health biosciences pathway coincidentally all existed on the western side of the county, which created barriers for the students on the east to be able to access these types of programs. Using these sorts of data tools and having conversations about this, we can really reveal where there's opportunities to expand opportunity. And we're going to have conversations. We've just begun. We kicked off yesterday with the interim superintendent and leadership team, what the guardrails on this project might be. And we come at it from an open-ended perspective, and we'll have a lot of dialogue around this being a plan about the facilities. But we might look also at program changes, kind of like the career tech mapping I was just showing you. We might consider even changes to the portfolio, which would affect zoning, potentially the number, size, and location of facilities and the type of grade configurations that are housed in the buildings. So there potentially is change on the horizon beyond the status quo of just let's fix what's broken or try to give every school today as it exists where it is the sorts of amenities that are in other places. This might stretch a bit further. We might even consider policy outcomes as part of this comprehensive view. a little bit about the process and what this timeline looks like. I'm not going to walk you through every detail and nuance of it. We've just started this work with the district. But fundamentally, this is about having clear roles and a predictable roadmap in a way that achieves transparency and creates an opportunity to build on the trust that the community has for the district. And it has different roles that are kind of conveyed here. We start the process without getting into your school, my school, and starting at a point that potentially could be contentious or zero-sum game type conversations. I know that might exist here, but we really started at a point of agreement. It's what are the guiding principles that need to drive this work? What are the values that we hold true for each and every student within the school district? We start there intentionally at the beginning, and we can get deep into the data. You've seen a few of the preliminary things. There's going to be a lot more deep data that we look on top of that. But it's really starting with principles, overlaying that with data, and then we'll get to the point of actually doing design thinking and working with different stakeholder groups to envision what the future might be. The image we'll portray here, we work multilingually. I, myself, and members of my team are bilingual English-Spanish, and we do have access to other partners and resources that can avail themselves to other languages to reach your diverse communities. And we'll also be working closely with the in-house resources that work with your communities right now. And fundamental to it is we want to bring students into this process as much as we can. I've got kind of headlines from work we did in Long Beach, California a couple of years ago, where we helped them secure a $1.8 billion bond program. And the student advocates had a major voice in our process there. We believe strongly in having multiple options and not just creating a plan with best of intentions and saying, hey, community, what do you think? We'd rather come at it from a perspective of we have choices here. One choice, and it needs to be considered an active choice, is not changing. The status quo really needs to be considered an active choice and a decision to continue doing what you're doing. Or maybe there's an option B that might be a little different in the future than it is today. Option C, even more dramatically different. And we often come at it with an option D that's blank. We give the community the opportunity to weigh in and be co-authors of the plan and come up with those ideas. There might be that brilliant teacher that said, for years I've been wanting to do this. And finally, they have actually an opportunity here to weigh in a way that could be meaningful and surface and perhaps even wind up in the final recommendations. We do all sorts of engagement as part of our process. I mentioned our partners. They are familiar with their community. They're from the community. They've worked together before, and they've worked with the district together before. I sought them out and recruited them, and I could not be more pleased with the opportunity to work with Erica Aviles, Shondell Newsom, and their teams. And finally, at the end, we want to make sure that these stakeholders not just weigh in on it and then they read the report in the newspaper or watch it on the board meeting, that we actually circle back to them and make sure that they realize and see the successes of all their input and work. And we've seen transformative outcomes as a result of this type of engagement. So the participants and the structure of it is still being designed with the district, but by and large, here's what we proposed, and likely will be some manifestation of this. But 3 distinct opportunities to engage. One, really, if you look at this process as a partnership between the district and the community, we will have working groups that represent the district, as well as geographically oriented stakeholder advisory groups that represent the community. And then anyone and everyone can participate in open invitation, transparent community forums along the way. So I got a little bit here about the composition of them, the district planning group having district level leadership, and the roles, relative roles listed here as well, but they will set the tone with the vision and goals for the process, as well as be the primary authors of the options that are put forward to the community. The stakeholder advisory group will be closely aligned with it, but the composition will be students, as I mentioned earlier, but parents, teachers, community representatives, and their role will be to provide input on this, to react to and vet some of the early drafts of the options from the perspective of the community and before the drafts get put out into the public. They will also co-design and author surveys that we put forward to the community. And I believe that's the end of my presentation. I'd love to entertain any questions or reactions to
Thank you,
shared
Mr.
with you.
Mills, for a very thorough presentation here. I will leave it open for questions. Anybody from the board will have any questions for Mr. Mills? Go ahead. Go ahead, Gina. Or, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really great to see the full kind of scope of it. Unless I missed it, I do have a couple of questions. One, what is the full timeline in terms of, like, is it a calendar year? If you said the time expectation, I just didn't hear it.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, the goal would be that we have a final recommendation to this committee and the Board of School Trustees by the end of 2025.
Great. And then, this was the proposal that was approved for $5.7 million, and that was being charged to our bond fund. Now, I'm just curious, with bond funds, that's something that we pay over 20 years. So I'm wondering if that's something that's like, if there was a consideration of putting in an administrative fund or something that essentially we're paying a loan for the consulting, or am I misunderstanding the source of this funding?
I guess, yes. Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, please clarify.
Yeah, so, because we have our administrative side of bond funds, right? Is that falling under this category as administration of bond funds, which doesn't really fit? I'm just kind of curious as to why this fell under bond funding versus, more facilities outside of bond, since bond is something that we're repaying over time and is used for capital expenses. So how the master planning report is a part of a capital expense is just a question in terms of how it was allocated.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, in all of our capital fund covers all expenses, soup to nuts, of any facility capital investment. And that covers our administrative costs, i.e. personnel, as well as indirect expenses to that department, as well as the design and construction of it. So this is basically informing and directing recommendations of how we're going to utilize those capital funds. So that's how we classified it to be an administrative cost to the bond.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry?
Paul Mills, for the record, and it is customary for school districts to use the pre-designed services would fall into the same camp like you would
To put
hiring
them
an
under
architect
bond
and those sorts
funds
of things. Right.
versus some other sort of account. Thank you. And then, so with the legislative session coming up in January, are we seeing an increase in, or a request for an increase in bond funds in order to, or are we going to wait until after this facility master plan is done to sort of structure a further ask?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, like I said, the $1.6 billion delta, we forecast that much later in the bond program. I think everything's secure for now for the projects we have on the near-term horizon. So I don't think there's a need to approach legislative action in this coming session, but there will be in future. And I think having this effort concluded by then positions us much better for that ask.
Okay. And then these are kind of tied together with that. I love the whole scope of this, so don't let these questions make it sound like I don't, because I'm actually quite excited. But when it comes to educational adequacy, especially with an interim superintendent, where some of those priorities might change, how is that changing dynamic going to be incorporated into this master plan? Is the assumption that a new superintendent will come in early enough in order to sort of exert their influence on that, or how are we dealing with that changeover in potential opinions?
What's great about our approach to doing this is that it's data-driven. We will collect a whole series of various objective data points that don't change. They're factual. And those can be applied to all sorts of different metrics, rubrics, and frameworks in different ways. So if priorities change in the future, we just change the different metrics and weights accordingly. But the underlying data is based on what exists. I don't know if that makes sense, but it does transcend time and different objectives or programs and initiatives.
I see. So you're saying if a new superintendent sets a different educational priority, either with curriculum or whatnot,
Absolutely.
the data you're collecting can just be used in its new required way. Okay. And then I'll leave the cost benefit analysis question to you, Yvette, because I figure that might come up for you. But does this also mean that we are planning on redoing all FCIs over the course of this year outside of our normal 5-year scope? Or how are we going to be handling those parameters in terms of examination of all schools?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, yes. I think that's been a limiting factor as we make CIP recommendations, right? 1/5 or 4/5 the portfolio is outdated information, yet we're expected to make real-time decision-making. So part of Canon's scope is to validate a small portion of maybe those older FCI stuff so that the recommendations being put forward is more actualized and maybe not potentially 4.5, 5 years old. So they are going to be doing facility condition assessments, working alongside district staff and contracted partners in that effort. So we're getting a lot more accurate data.
Okay, great. I think that's it for now. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Ms. Gina Blackman. Ms. Williams, you have questions for Mr. Mills?
I do, thank you. Mr. Chairman, is it okay if Todd goes? Because I might have a few more questions than Todd. So I don't want,
Go ahead,
is that
Todd.
okay with you? Would
Floor is
that
all
be
yours,
okay?
Todd.
Thank you so much. I want to be respectful.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I appreciate that. You never know when I'm going to have to head on out of my office and deal with something. So this is Todd Peterson, the principal at Mannion Middle School, for the record. I have a kind of a question, more of a comment that you may want to respond to. I don't think we need a math lesson on the formula that is being used to determine capacity, but I just want to point out that across our district, some of our schools are smaller than they've ever been. Yet at the same time, our facilities are fuller than they've ever been. And part of some of the reasons for that include, number one, increased purchasing of teachers, which then creates a need for more classrooms to be utilized. So while we're funded at 36-1, many of our buildings are utilizing the money that we have to lower class sizes down to, somewhere sometimes 30-1. And in doing that, you hire more teachers, which, depending on the formula that we use to determine capacity, we look like we're under capacity, but the reality is that every single classroom is being utilized by staff. Another example would be self-contained programs. More and more self-contained programs are being placed in comprehensive schools. And in doing that, those programs are being placed in classrooms that maybe have 12 kids in them, yet the classroom itself is built could also be used as a math class and has a capacity of 36. So I just would encourage everyone that when we're looking at data and we're looking at this idea of capacity, that if we don't peel back the onion and really look at each individual school and what is actually happening there in terms of building capacity, we're missing the mark. And I'll just say this. Here, I can only speak for Mannion. Every single classroom is being used, yet I believe in your data sheet, we are being shown as under capacity. And I have no additional classrooms to use. And I know that's similar with a lot of my colleagues as well. So I just wanted to put that information to the group to kind of consider that when we're looking at this idea of capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Todd. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to center my questions, comments around CTE. That's a big issue for us, particularly with our African American students. There is a huge gap as it relates to access to CTE programs. And one of the things in our upcoming agenda item for tasks and motions is still timely, and hopefully we can get that presentation much sooner, Brandon, because it does directly impact this master plan. And so a couple things. What have you seen as it relates to other large urban districts and how they are addressing the gap to accessing CTE programs? That's number one. Number two, one of the things that the district was looking at was actually taking CTAs that are geographically located and busing students there for CTE programs. And now with looking at some of these numbers, I guess one of my concerns is, or something that we should be looking at as the Bond Oversight Committee, is future high schools that may be underutilized as well, and maybe not needing to build so many CTAs, but instead converting existing schools into career and technical or CTA programs where students can go get their CTE, then go back to their home school for the rest of their training. Of course, that requires more busing um, in the budget, but as from a cost perspective, would the busing cost us less than actually building these? Now it's what, over 300? I can't remember what we paid for that last CTA, and it was only less than 2,000 students. Would it be better for us then to maybe really seriously look at this? And is this something that you've addressed? Have you seen this concept utilized in other districts? If so, what is your feeling on that? I'd be interested in that. And then also, you mentioned I said cost comparison, community engagement. You mentioned in your proposal, maybe you haven't decided on 3 meetings, but I saw 3 meetings in your example. So hopefully there'll be more than 3 meetings. The other thing is not just geographically, but also based on student groups or communities, because our student groups, depending on that student group, has different needs. So our ELs, our African American students, for example, have completely different needs than other students. And so that needs to be addressed. We have a large um, proficiency gap as it relates to our African American students. And so we would want to see in our master plan that addressed as well. And then there's a trust issue when it comes to community. And so when I see the term surveys, I get very nervous about that, because surveys can be swayed in a way, the questions can be swayed in a way so that you get an answer that you really want, as opposed to a survey where people are allowed to express themselves in a way where we then see issues or concerns we hadn't thought about. So we're kind of like, driving an answer as opposed to really looking for an issue or concern, and then even some great suggestions that community may have. Lastly, as it relates to the groups that you mentioned the district planning group, for example. It looked in your example that the district planning group establishes the vision, goal, develop facility options, set priorities, and final recommendations. How will the weight from the community and other stakeholders weigh into that district planning group's decisions or plan? So those are kind of the things. I'm just throwing them out there. I don't expect you to answer all of that, but I am particularly interested in the CTE question that I asked, that I started off with. And I would love to talk with you further. I've been working with the district in this CTE area for well over a decade, but it is a big concern, and we see a huge disparity in the state of Nevada for our college and career readiness diploma. I don't know if you know in Nevada, but we have a college and career readiness diploma. So we are getting rid of our advanced honors diploma and replacing it with the college and career readiness diploma. However, many of our students aren't able to achieve that college and career readiness diploma because they don't have the access as other students being able to obtain that. So we see a huge disparity in that number. And then I just want to close by saying to all of you, including Brandon, that I'm excited to see a master plan. I think it's way overdue. And so I fully support, having a master plan. It's just implementing it and making sure that we have a plan that is going to work for our students, where we can begin to finally see student achievement. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Mr. Mills, would you like to respond to any of her questions?
Before because I want to get Ms. Williams the most amount of answers, and potentially we'd follow up after the fact with some of these, but what I heard was 5 distinct areas you wanted response in. The larger schools being able to handle more CTE offerings. You also talked about the career tech versus distributed model, maybe the busing implications or operational aspects. Third, you wanted, as far as community engagement, representation of diverse student groups to try to address some of the diversity or ethnic and race-driven proficiency gaps. You had comments about the surveys and how surveys would, how we objectively put those out there about what we're trying to obtain. You also talked about the groups, how will the district planning group receive and validate or utilize input from stakeholder advisory or community forum groups, i.e. how will they be influenced? You also talked about the very last one relating to the career and tech diploma. Did I miss any ones that we need to follow up with?
No, I think you hit right on the money. Thank you, Brandon. One thing I will say too on that survey is they need to be culturally competent. So we can't assume that everyone understands lingo and certain terms and things like that. We got to make sure that in the wording, the way we word these surveys, very basic, basic 101, without any I'm sure I forgot his name that he introduced himself, but I'm sorry, I got caught up in the presentation, so I apologize for forgetting your name. But I'm sure you've heard that before, because it sounds like you've done a lot of work around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I'm sure you've heard that many times about the content of surveys.
So before I turn it over to Mr. Mills, yes, they do a lot of work around the country. I'll let him elaborate on that, but I want to be certain if we respond to maybe one of these within. I know you expressed an interest in hearing more about the career tech models, so I'll let Mr. Mills address that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you and applaud you for your questions, and also to the other members who have posed questions. These are fantastic questions. It shows me that you guys get it and you really care, and I can work with folks like you. You're really tiptoeing into a lot of areas that are my favorite subjects. Career tech is right at the forefront and vanguard of where public education is leading in our country. Working with school districts from Massachusetts all the way to Honolulu, this is at the topic, and removing barriers and creating more opportunities for students to find a future pathway in career or in college is fundamental to the way we design school systems. Just as one example, we are right now designing an exciting new career tech academy that's specialized for medical careers in the greater Denver metro area. And in this school, we explored all different models that are kind of hub and spoke, where students might passport in from various high schools and avail themselves to programs and resources at that school for part of the day, or whether it's a standalone magnet school. We will work closely with administration to examine what infrastructure exists today and explore potential outcomes in the future that might be different, all through the lens of trying to remove those barriers and maximize opportunities for students. As far as community engagement is concerned, our slides here are really boiled down, and there's a lot of detail and intentionality behind the way we've designed this, but it is absolutely designed in a way to maximize the trust that can be built with the process, with intentionally designed and formulated groups that are representative of the various perspectives. The stakeholder advisory group will actually help co-author surveys that are put forward. As a big data wonk, I really want to make sure that the data I receive is something that we can go to the bank with and really understand that it is a good representative pulse of the community. But we're not looking at the survey as the only means to reach communities. We do know from our experience that working with communities where they are, meeting them where they are. And it doesn't necessarily mean through a computer screen as the only means to get there. That it means being face-to-face in person, being in community centers, churches, at the schools themselves, in places of business where harder to reach communities exist. We take stock of and we ask for voluntary demographic information associated with each survey response so that we can measure and benchmark that against the composition of your district at large in different regions to see if there are some voices that are absent. And then we will intentionally, before the surveys close, do outreach that are targeted to make sure that we can bring Spanish-speaking participants or others that might be immigrants or others that don't feel comfortable participating either through technology or coming out in person to work. But we designed this with a lot of intent, and I would love to engage in a conversation if you have ideas about ways we can take what we're doing and make it even better.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments and your feedback. I look forward to talking with you all more and seeing this move forward.
Okay, thank you, Yvette. Let's move on to Mr. Byron Goins. So you've been waiting there patiently.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate it. I looked at the stakeholder plan, just Byron Goins' background, planning commissioner. This kind of, when you say master plan, it kind of reminds me of when you're looking at a master plan community and what all goes into it. One thing I would like to implore the group is looking at your community forums. I think it's very important that you get your stakeholder advisory group intact, which is your student, parents, teachers, and community representatives. But even more, the students and the parents is where I think the input should come from. Naturally, you guys go out and get all the numbers and plug them into these plans. But when you get out into these communities, you need to hear directly from the students and the parents that are going to be impacted. I don't know if 3 rounds with multiple locations is enough. And I'm also concerned about the types of data that you're pulling. Does that data include demographics as well? Because we have some impacted communities here in the Clark County School District that I guess the best way to say it are usually left out. Will you start with those communities first with your surveys and your community forums and your stakeholders, or will you start with more affluent schools first and work your way in?
Great question. Paul Mills, Canon Design, for the record. Data is absolutely fundamental to this, and it's not just facilities data, it is indeed demographic data. We have typically worked with, and we're in the process of collaborating with the district on receipt and transfer of anonymized student data that will include home address so that we can pinpoint on a GIS system where folks happen to live relative to where they attend schools. We also ask for all manner of demographic information, socioeconomic, race, ethnicity, and also student performance metrics around English language arts, math, proficiency data, so we can find those sorts of gaps and see where different grade configurations contribute towards different outcomes, et cetera. But it's a very comprehensive approach that we like to do. As far as process, we want to have equitable participation in the process, so no community has outsized access to participate in the process versus others. Timing-wise, we want to start them all at that point where we have a round of communication that doesn't name a single school, that it's about what's right for all students, and to build consensus around what our core values are, what our shared values are, that, believe it or not, in 2024, 25, we can actually build some areas in common ground in agreement. From there, we will overlay the data and design a series of options, and it's not just a one shot at it. We envision this and have designed it in a way that's iterative, so there's opportunities for rounds of input. We have designed over the next summer the opportunity for some targeted engagements in areas where there's potential for more dramatic change versus some of the others. These are probably in some of the more older communities where the facilities are at or beyond their useful life, and there's opportunities for a fresh start. In which case, we would have not just a round of engagements in the fall with different options. Let's get some different ideas at the table and make some decisions, but rather an opportunity in those areas with more dramatic change to have more iterative engagements. I hope I addressed your specific questions, and I would love any sort of clarifications you might want.
Yes, you did. But I want to implore, I'll just give an example. If you went into a underperforming area based on your demographics and you send out an open invitation for a community forum, and let's say you do it 3 times and you get maybe 5 to 10 people at each session. Is that going to be enough input for you out of that area, or would you dig more to get more input from the area? Because usually what happens is it's kind of like, hey, we as consultants, we put out 2 or 3 invitations. This many people showed up. I understand you're using some new marketing, which is a great community partner, but there are other groups out there that can help with that outreach if you reach out and engage them into the community. We do some things a little different. We use our churches. We use a facility like I have, which is the Martin Luther King Jr. Senior Center. This is a great place to meet where the community can come out and they know where we are and they feel comfortable in this environment and discussing things that go on in the neighborhood instead of from a 3,000 square foot, 3,000 feet up looking down. Just want to make sure that the engagement of the true participants and parents and students in the community is that you hear their voice.
Thank you for the clarification point, and absolutely aligns with our intent and design for this process. While we want to remove every opportunity where people can say, I wasn't invited or I didn't have an opportunity to participate, doesn't mean that we can get each and every person who has a stake in this to participate in the process, but we want to go over the top. And our project is resourced to the point where we have a lot of resources that we can bring to bear to achieve all those. I appreciate the suggestion of specifics on some avenues to reaching the community. And
Yes.
Through our consultants, we will be connecting with you and others that can help design this in a way that maximizes that exposure.
Thank you. The organization I work for, the EOB, Economic Opportunity Board, we actually own a radio station. And so part of our Saturday and weekend programming is not just music, but it is meaningful dialogue and shows. So please reach out, schedule some time, come on our shows where you can get the word out. Thank you. Great presentation.
I can tell it's not your first rodeo, and we'll take you up on that offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. Todd, I see you raised your hand back up. Want to have a follow-up?
I did, yeah. I was wondering if you reviewed any CCSD self-contained data for self-contained programs. And I'm asking that question because the district data shows a significant increase in self-contained programs across our elementary schools, which will eventually be in our middle schools and eventually will be in our high schools. And I think it's fair to say that an underrepresented population is our families of students in self-contained programs. They do not always come out to community meetings and identify as part of a community. And so I tell you that because as we're looking more and more to CTAs and magnets as the future, it's really important that everyone understands that CTAs and full wall-to-wall magnet schools in our district do not have self-contained programs. So as we're looking at an increase in self-contained programs at the elementary school level, our creation of more and more magnet and CTAs do not allow us to put those programs in magnet and CTAs. Therefore, they fall more and more on the comprehensive schools. And that places a number of challenges on our facilities at these comprehensive schools. So I just want to make sure that when we're looking at the master plan, we are absolutely including our district data on the exponential growth that's going to take place over the next 5 years of our self-contained programs. So that's my question, if the self-contained data from our district was taken into account and reviewed for this presentation.
Mr. Peterson, Brandon McLaughlin for the record, yes. I mean, while not much has commenced yet, we know that the self-contained data is absolutely something we're going to review against all these other metrics. That is a big area, and I hear you loud and clear in that.
Thank you,
And Paul
Todd.
Mills, candidate design for the record. Just as a follow-up to it, and I appreciate your question earlier about, and comment about capacity. It's something that's so fundamental to doing proper planning. And a fundamental cardinal rule when I approach these things is we're not going to paint you into a corner that assumes the status quo allocations and modeling is for the future and forever, that we have some flexibility in there to make sure that we're not limiting your options in the future. Self-contained programs are absolutely vital to any public school system. And I'm learning now from you some of the structures in place relative to magnet schools and things, and we're definitely going to be taking that into account as we move forward. I appreciate that.
Because they're not fundamental to the magnet school programs. So they're fundamental to the comprehensive public school system. Thank you.
Matt DeFalco.
Thank you. Matt DeFalco for the record. I got one piece of input and then a question. Just following on that conversation that we've been having, since I've been here, it seems like a lot of the community outreach that the district does, there's a group of people who are highly engaged, who participate in everything and aren't necessarily representative of the broader parents and students in this community. And so I think it's really important to try to figure out how to dig deeper and get past that to really understand the input that our students and teachers and families want to provide. And then my question, is there a plan to keep this committee engaged throughout the process in terms of regular updates and opportunities for feedback and collaboration? And maybe even is there an opportunity for somebody on this board to represent this board on the district planning group or stakeholder advisory group? I wanted to bring that up as well.
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I'll start out that in the initial design of this, I had us at least providing updates to you. Probably not every meeting, but at least every other meeting of kind of, hey, here's the status with Cannon's work. And certainly the model that worked for Revision 5 was having committee members involved in that, in the various planning groups. So I don't know if we've landed on an exact representation of that, but I think at least the stakeholder advisory group, as parents, community members that you all represent, is a ground zero place for that. But I think having some representation even on a district planning group may be something we explore.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Abraham.
Hello, Abraham Camille for the record. Very good presentation, Mr. Mills. Looking forward to working together with our committee. But I kind of want to echo a few things that everybody's been saying. I do believe that we need way more than 3 meetings. And how do we do these surveys? Also, one of the things that I think is very important is the time of these meetings. Not an 11 o'clock meeting when parents are working, not 5 o'clock meetings. And I understand that some staff from the district, they're on the clock, but the parents that don't work for the district, they might have hard time coming to these meetings. So maybe some Saturday meetings might be needed. Also, maybe a recommendation to take advantage of staff development days and actually have meetings where we can engage with our staff from the district, our teachers and principals, and also maybe a way where we can get input anonymously from our teachers and from other staff members, because unfortunately there is a lot of employees that do work for our school district that do feel that they get pushed back or that they could get reprimanded for just speaking their minds. So with that in mind, maybe having an opportunity where they can give honest opinion and not have any side of a pushback that they might feel. Not saying that there is, but that they might feel for those. So maybe that as an option. I would also like to maybe get a I don't know if we can, not every meeting, but every other meeting or quarterly, because at the cost of the consultants, you know, the 5.7 million, if we're looking to break it down for 12 months, at $475,000 a month. That's a lot of money. And so I would kind of like to suggest maybe we get a report back of how we're spending this money, especially if it's coming from the bond oversight. And that way we can be accountable to our community and say, hey, this is where the money's going to for this master plan, and this is how we're engaging it. This is what it costs for a community meeting. This is what it's going to cost to have security while we're having this community meeting. Like actually have a real breakdown of the awarded bid that you were awarded to, and I'm familiar with most of the some of the teams, especially the local ones here. So I'm looking forward with this engagement and moving forward with this. I would also encourage you to visit our radio show on Saturdays. We are the #1 radio show on Saturdays in the Hispanic market. So just throwing that one out there as well. But if you really want to reach all the workers and parents, you do need to think outside the box to actually get these surveys and get real response, because it's sad when we only get 5 or 10 parents or very small community members. I can't be the only one speaking from the east side of Las Vegas. There's more parents, there's more engagement, and we really need to think outside the box and different ways. If it's going to be social media marketing, direct marketing, like they did for the political season, and engage in different age groups and things like that. Maybe also suggest a meeting, a time slot during the school day, and actually engage your juniors and your seniors and get that student voice, maybe during their government class or something, and have that participation. And then that way you can actually get the entire student body to participate. And so I just want to see more thinking outside the box, because I don't want to say, oh, we only had 5 people show up, and those 5 people are going to affect and represent the entire school district, and we're such a large school district, and you guys have to understand that Las Vegas is very unique because of our parents' different work schedules. You know, I can be at an early morning job site, and I can also be at another job site that's during the graveyard shift. So we have to think just a little outside the box, but I'm looking forward to these. And then also for this FCI reports, if we can probably get those, we know what older schools are, maybe get more details for the committee, but also for the community, so that way we can all be engaged on this conversation. That's pretty much everything I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Creel. Is there any response from either of you two? Mr.
I
Creel?
will follow up and appreciate the comment, input, and suggestions. Mr. Camejo, it's almost as if you were at our internal team meeting this morning when we were going through some of the tactics relative to community engagement, working with Sumnu and Aviles. But I want to make sure that it's really clear in this process that those series of meetings aren't just discrete, one shot only 3 times and we're done. No, those are actually seasons, if you will, where there's going to be a series of very intentionally spaced in time and space and virtual various opportunities, recognizing that you have a lot of families that work in the service industry with all manner of hours here in Las Vegas, right? And we're going to be very intentional about removing barriers so people can participate in the process. I love what you're suggesting with students, and we have a plan for that, but I'd love to think through some of these opportunities where we get big hit opportunities to hit a lot of folks. I will defer to Mr. McLaughlin in the district relative to the frequency of advising you on status, but we're open to all manner of that to improve the profile of this process, to make sure it's out in the community and we can bring people's voices to bear in it. And anyway, appreciate the comment.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, I'll clarify maybe 2 core areas I heard you saying. Yes, to understate what Mr. Mills said, we very much could have done the quantitative analysis ourselves as a district. That was, I think, one of the questions from the trustees when they awarded this job. And I think we've done that in the past. And then there's always this gap between what district staff quantitatively worked up and then what the community is desiring or hearing from us. And so, yeah, call it a large lion's share of why any of this proposal went forward was so that we could have a meaningful dialogue with the community members and not just in a one-shot methodology. I mean, these guys just did it with Washoe County, and I've done it with many other districts, that if we don't get a certain demographic that we're after, we don't get a good attendance at it, if we pick the wrong spot, I mean, there's opportunities where we want to hear what we missed. So at the end of 2025, the goal would be, hey, everyone has heard everything that we need to hear. Everything has been considered. Everything's been weighed. You guys have been a part of that recommendation process with our trustees, that we're ultimately arriving at a more defined process where this plan will take us longer and with a lot more buy-in with the community. So we're not going to say land use entitlements and someone says, I didn't know about this. And granted, there's always going to be outliers that they move in, they truly miss that series of messaging. But by and large, the position where we can get to where a community, we show up to land use and they say, oh yeah, we heard about this in the facility master plan, or hey, this model, this school inception was something I thought of at the community meeting. And so that would be overarching goals of it all, is why we even went down this effort to begin with. And so I think we hear you loud and clear, resoundingly from the committee. I think we're still in designing what that process is. That's kind of 1A of what I want to follow up with is frequency of updates. So why I would recommend at least every other month is I don't know that monthly there'll be enough to quantify or update on, because I mean, each of these steps is a pretty big lift, each in and of themselves, but they'll be kind of mid-lift if we do every other month. So I think every other month gives us the frequency where it's meaningful stuff to share, and as well as allows the team to focus on supporting the work, not necessarily just for creating a report for report's sake. And then item 2 that I heard loud and clear was the transparency of their cost proposal, which we're happy to share to the committee as well, so you guys can be advocates of this work to your community.
Thank you so much. Looking forward for working with everybody in our committee.
Thank you, Brandon. Chad Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mills, thank you for the presentation. It was great, very informative. I first would just like to second Mr. Camejo's comment about like this committee having a full understanding of scope and objectives of the engagement, just so that maybe it was presented here in full, but it would be helpful, I think, to know kind of what this was supposed to be. So I second that. The 2 questions. First, Mr. Mills, for yourself, is it the plan from your perspective to and I will say, to take a step back, all of the community engagement and surveys and collaboration, and it's all critical. I mean, absolutely. My question is more, do you plan for there to be actionable feedback throughout the process, or is it best served to wait until the end, 13 months, final report, and then like that's kind of handed off to the district and the district then takes action on that?
Paul Mills, County Design Record. Absolutely. It's an integrated process where community engagement starts way before the end point of the process. That there are checkpoints, as I kind of suggested earlier, where we start, where we have conversations around what's right for all students. Then we explore what the data is and what it might suggest. Then we look at different options, and that's an iterative process into itself, to where community members have the opportunity to suggest permutations, changes, edits, or even whole new ideas that they might bring to bear. So they will be engaged throughout over the course. That'll start after the holidays and pick up in mid to late spring. And there will be some targeted activity over the summer to make sure those communities that have opportunities perhaps for much beyond the status quo in terms of change to have more touches. And in the fall, there'll be a big blitz of activity and series of engagements. So a long way of saying, to your point, this isn't a, here's your plan, have fun with it. This is very much an integrated process that's participatory and transparent.
I appreciate that. Just to clarify though, and I understand like the engagement process. I think I was more asking, like, will you have feedback for the district to take action on changes to make throughout the process, or will that action be at the end?
Typically, what we want to do is comprehensively think through an end state for the entire system, which allows us to be able to focus on areas of priority and set a sequence of projects. But sometimes there are processes like, look, you have an active capital program, and perhaps there's some stuff that's, let's call it low dangling fruit or opportunities that the data and priorities expressed might suggest earlier action than the completion of the master plan. That could be on the table, but at this point, we haven't gone through those details yet. Is that what you were getting at with your question?
That is, yeah, thank you. Second question for Mr. McLaughlin. And this is just builds off of that last point. There's obviously projects in various stages of planning, design, development, construction, right? Is there a point in your mind where you draw a line for those projects and say, like, these are so far along that these make sense to continue and finish, but maybe at some stage you don't want to sink costs or sink funds into projects that might change with like recommendations 13 months from now? What's your thoughts on that?
That was part of the recommendation 3, I believe, in the June 20th revision that we put forward to you guys. Was we picked off things that were supposed to open school year 27-28 as a far enough milestone where it would have minimal disruptions to, say, the construction labor market, where we wouldn't be creating a crater in and of ourselves as a public work entity, but was far enough off where we had some adaptability, where if we said, hey, there's a low-hanging fruit, this one that we put on hold for 27 ultimately makes sense to move forward with, we move forward with it, and we're not any worse for the wear. So we took all those 27 ones, or are taking them through 100% design, and in the rare instances where we say yes, great, we'll just bid those out and still try to target 27 timeframes for opening some of those schools, but also it allows us where we have a fraction, much smaller fraction of the costs encumbered. If, say, I'll use an example, just ubiquitous, one of the round middle schools that we endeavored in 2021, right? If quantitatively we demonstrate that certain middle school is not necessary to the portfolio's long-term viability, and the community agrees with that, and the trustees can agree on that, then we've only sunk a incremental cost relative to the 9 figures we could have unnecessarily encumbered for project just because of past interpretations of that with changing data, we should make more informed decisions with it. So I think we're at a healthy stage of it where we've pushed off far enough where it allows us to be adaptable, but it's kind of right on the heels. So you lead into a very much targeted effort that in the spring, if things make absolute sense and we've got them basically shovel ready, the goal would be we move some interim projects forward at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions up here on the board? Go ahead.
Just
Mr.
one-
Grayson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to be placed back in queue.
We
This is
got-
Yvette Williams.
Yes, I got you. I see your hand raised up. I was
Okay.
just going through the other people that
Thank
have been
you.
waiting longer. So thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Rob Gertison, for the record. I just wanted to applaud the effort and also the intelligence that was put into this. As an architect, I mean, the first thing that we do is if we're armed with good knowledge, then it's almost hard to mess up the design. I mean, I don't want to short sell our work here, but really this is really good knowledge, and I think what it does is for the bigger picture, it creates a very comprehensive, inclusive consensus, moving forward. So that way everybody has an agreement to it. So that way it's not, Brandon, why did you do this? Or, it's a consensus. With that comment, I was just going to ask about the operations. I see that, we have goals, visions of the district. We have the stakeholder group, which is, the students, parents, teachers, community representatives, and then the community forums. Anything with facilities, like the operations, the maintenance, I'm sure that's probably the #1 obvious one, but I'm sure that falls within the purview of this.
So Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, approximately 50% of the district planning group is the operational side of the district for their input to be. So it's transportation, there's facility management or a maintenance team, as well as some of our related emergency management, security as well. So it's a very diverse group that we have representation of.
Great, thank you. And then I got just two more questions. The next one was just looking at just peer groups. So I know there's a lot of great information that can be distilled from just objectively looking at data. And then there's a subjective interviews that always happen. And then with those subjectives, you always have to scrub through and find out and turn those into objective, usable data that is usable for everybody, everybody. But with the district, does the district actually have a peer group possibly that might meet with other districts? And if not, then I might recommend that, there's a lot of other really great districts that we could be a sounding board as far as, what we're intending on doing, the problems that we're facing, because they might have some good solutions as well.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, I myself am part of numerous professional organizations related with schools of our magnitude. So Council of Great City Schools is one. And I know other large urban districts recently have presented their facility master plans and the outcomes it was able to obtain for them. I know Mr. Mills was in attendance for at least one of those presentations. I also sit as a regional appointee on the Association for Learning Environments, which is also a great resource that allows for a lot of cross knowledge between how other schools are addressing some of these larger challenges that are ongoing, so cost, enrollment trends. So there's a lot of knowledge share out there available to us that we're actively a part of.
Great. Thank you very much. Great efforts and also a lot of value brought to the district. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerson. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple questions. Nevada Learning Academy, is that part of your master plan? That is our online CTE programs. We have been working with the district on trying to develop more access for our African American students by utilizing the CTE programs through Nevada Learning Academy. And so it just dawned on me during all of these questions that how are we engaging Nevada Learning Academy in this master plan? Because that's a big part of creating more access. And I don't know if that's been discussed with you or not, but that also is transportation, and this is for you probably, Brandon, transportation part of the CCSD planning group, I would hope, considering transportation is going to be a big part of this, if we're going to make sure that we have access. And then I wanted to also mention that going back to our community meetings, it's probably people tend to give an opinion or have an idea or can express their desires if they have a better understanding of the concepts or the opportunities or the ideas, the options that are available to them. And so I just want to say that as we move forward with community engagement, we need to think in terms of a progressive engagement. Okay, so we start off with not, informational. This is why we're doing it, our purpose for doing it, and ending with these are the things that we're looking at doing, but here are some other ideas and options. Which one do you like? Which one do you feel would serve your students better? I think we really need to make sure we make this as easy as possible for people to really understand the benefit to them and allow them the opportunity to give that honest feedback, even if it's maybe an option that maybe we would prefer something different based on our own personal interests. The other thing I want to mention is we have a BSU network that we sponsor in partnership with CCSD, and we're in 50 schools now. So we have over 1,500 students, both middle school and high school. The majority of them are high school. We only have about seven now, middle schools that we're doing alignments with. But our focus with our middle school is career exploration. So we're trying to get these kids really interested and a career path when they go to their feeder high school, exploring what CTE programs they have at that high school so that when they get to ninth grade, they're already thinking in terms of what courses do they need to take. We have our middle school workshop coming up on December 10th at the Galaxy Theater. We're doing that in partnership with the CTE department. Where our middle schoolers, we have over 200 middle schoolers coming from 6 of our middle schools. And so they get the opportunity to explore these different opportunities. And then in our high schools, we're focused on college and career readiness. So, for example, we had the state come in and do a session on what career and technical education programs are available. But then, when they ask the kids, about the programs that they're in or classes they're taking as electives, many of those qualified for the CCR diploma towards the CCR diploma, but they didn't realize that it did. So there's a real lack of education on the part of our students, not really knowing, the pathway before them. So I think there's some work in the master plan to consider that as well. So I just wanted to give you that feedback. Hopefully that's a little more helpful to you too, especially as it relates to our African American students.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any response? Brandon?
Yeah, so NVLA is one of our 374, 430 school sites, so absolutely they're a part of the discussion. Transportation, I believe Mr. Gertison may have asked, transportation along with all operations teams are representing approximately 50% of our district planning groups. They are involved. I certainly hear your feedback about the surveys. I think I trust in Cannon's design of those surveys in partnership with the stakeholders that yes, we need to inform them of what they're soliciting feedback for, so knowing the why. And then certainly we open all invitations to the BSU network to be a part of the community groups. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms.
Yeah, I think
Williams.
there's an opportunity to really get a good group of African American students together on this and have them really weigh in and give their feedback. Even if it's, do a survey, I can make sure that our advisors, we have over 78 advisors, make sure that all the advisors get that and have their students fill that out or have discussions in their weekly club meetings. So I think there's an opportunity to really get some good feedback from them.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any other questions from the board? Go ahead, Mr. Flatt.
Dave Flatt for the record. Second time I've heard this presentation. You did a phenomenal job as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Flatt. Are there any other questions from the board pertaining to 2.04 Facility Master Plan Introduction?
Abraham Kamel for the record. Just one more suggestion with echoing Ms. Williams's comments. I would also encourage to invite and have some of these meetings with the parents that are union members from our different unions. Because if we're talking to these students and we're trying to teach them, different career paths, let's maybe hold some meetings at the union halls, like at IBW, at the labor's union halls. They have the facilities there, and maybe you can engage the parents that are working, but also along with our partners, especially because this week is apprenticeship week. So why not engage our parents that are all union members, because they're active very actively in our community. And stuff, and I say that because I chose my professional career went from from a different path from just college, and I did the apprenticeship myself many years ago. So maybe engaging those parents as well, just as a suggestion.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camejo. Are there any other questions pertaining to 2.04? I just wanted to ride the coattails of what Mr. Camejo said. Right now, there's actually a great program going on because of Apprenticeship Week. Right now, there's all the various unions, 19 different trades are right now showing what the unions and the apprenticeships have to offer to over 400 CCSD students currently right now. So it's a great thing. Great turnout today. I just came back from helping the barbecue to feed these kids. It's a great thing going on today, or the whole week, actually. Okay, is there any public comment pertaining to 2.04 Facility Master Plan Introduction? Hearing none, we are moving on to 2.05 System Level Condition Index for Heating, Ventilation, and Air Conditioning Recommendations. Okay, I guess Mr. Brandon McLaughlin, is there anything to?
So Brandon McLaughlin for the record, this was presented at last month's meeting as non-action. It was presentation discussion only, so at the request of the committee, we brought this back for possible action.
Okay, from the committee, is there any questions pertaining to 2.05?
Matthew
Go ahead,
DeFalco for the
Matt.
record. I don't have any questions, but just remembering our last meeting, I think we put this on here. Our committee, I feel, I think probably others do as well, we need to be more assertive in our role. And so when we have presentations like this, I think it's important to take what we learned and to give some feedback back to the Board of Trustees. Obviously, open to hearing what you guys think we should give back to the board in terms of feedback on this particular issue. But I just think it's important as a board that we do that.
Go ahead, Abraham.
Abraham Camille for the record. Brandon, is there any specific schools that we can maybe make a recommendation as a board? That way we can, to the trustees, to say, we can use some of our funds for needed repairs for the most effective schools that have the most affected ventilation issues. Because it's not just air conditioning, but it's, now it's getting cold. So if the units are still facing problems with air conditioning, I'm going to assume they're going to start facing problems with the heating issues. So would you advise us, how can we help, use our, the bond money that we have and incorporate it to facilities that they have their, the repair side of it, but maybe they need a replacement?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I think two things I can respond within it. So I just want to make clarification that I think there is a misnomer between assuming because the HVAC, more so the AC portion that people often generalize to HVAC, will impact the ability to heat, because they are oftentimes two distinct systems. I don't have the data exactly queried, but I'd venture to guess our AC systems are likely in worse shape than our heating systems, just because of the summer demand that we experience here seasonally. So I just want to reassure that just because a school is experiencing cooling issues only as recent as a month ago, I don't foresee that we'll have as many heating incidences of loss of service in the month ahead, in the months preceding it. So I think I just want to separate those two camps. The second piece of what can I advise on, this is the list of system conditions. These are the presumed conditions of those. It's the ratio, again, of the cost to replace versus repair. If I were to say, what's the ones that need it? Objectively, I couldn't state it outside of what's on the list here. This is the most objective measure we can stipulate that these schools in the SCIs provided are the list of needs. So really, at the desire and request of the committee is what you guys would like to recommend to the trustees.
Thank you, Brendan. Ms. Williams, you have a question?
Yes, well, Brandon, I'm gonna stay on that. So we have this list. I guess what I'm looking at, we don't have that many months before we get hot again. But we are in this hot desert, and we seem to be heating up a lot quicker than before. So I guess my question is there, maybe the question should be, can you or your staff provide maybe a priority over the next few months so that we get those with the greatest needs done prior to, let's just say, April? April 30th, May 1st, when it gets really hot. Is that something that you can do, is to provide us with some guidance as far as what you would recommend, your department would recommend or suggest that you could handle, considering your staffing, budget, all of that? Could you make some kind of a recommendation to us for the next meeting? Maybe that would help the committee members. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, committee members. So you guys weigh in. I'm just thinking that might be helpful. At least for me, it would be helpful to kind of get a little better understanding of a timeline, and what could we, which ones can we start to address so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation. What is that, 6 months from now? Let's see, November, December, January, February, March. Not 5 months. We're only talking 5 months.
Thank you, Ms.
So I
Williams.
think we should really maybe get out in front of it, is what I'm asking, with your suggestions.
Got you. Are there any other suggestions or comments pertaining to this? Go ahead, Mr. Camilo.
Abraham Camejo, yeah, echoing Ms. Williams, maybe if we can get an assessment, a deeper assessment, maybe from everything that has a CSI score of a 1.20 and up, and maybe see which ones we can target, so we can actually make a recommendation that says, hey, to the trustees, hey, this is what we recommend to replace, so we can try to, get ahead of the next hot season. Because, fixing an air conditioning, it's, at this level, is not quick. There's a bidding process and everything, all the wheels in motions. So maybe if we, just pick the score 120 and up and do the assessment that way.
Is that something you could do, Brandon, that wouldn't take too much of your time? I mean, you have the data, you have the information, or it's a matter of looking at your resources, staffing, that kind of thing?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Yeah, we can certainly put something together that would be responsive to those lists. I guess I'm unclear of what is the desire of the committee. So what I'm hearing is the desire of the committee is for some recommendation by staff to be made regarding how we address the perceptions and loss of services on the cooling side. Last summer, how do we not have a repeat? Is that good to assume within what I'm hearing?
Yeah, those with the greatest needs, I think, is because you're not going to be able to address all of them, right?
Right.
So I guess those with the greatest needs, and then I guess what I would be looking for is have you suggest to us what that greatest need parameter would be, because you have a better idea of resources, staffing, and all of that. So we're kind of looking for you to kind of give us a recommendation on, or some guidance is a better word, some guidance on that.
And Brandon,
you know what I mean?
yeah, Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I would say to Mr. Cameo's question earlier, this is our most objective way to do that, and that's per district regulation. But I'd say that a few qualifiers that I would allow or solicit for expansion of it would be things that would help out, say our maintenance drive is some of these that, like you see are well past their useful life. They're at 1.25, 1.2 and above predominantly. That means they're oftentimes our worst offenders for the maintenance side of things. They have the highest calls for service. They are the schools that are having the most recurrence of failing systems. So those are the ones that you oftentimes will hear about in the media reports. So maybe that's another factor within this listing, because yes, I can put together a list, but it's not going to modify from this unless additional inputs are looked at within it. So which some we can certainly do.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gina.
Hi, Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. So my, I guess my concern about sort of making a recommendation in a way that sort of, I feel like we're talking about this in a very specific bubble, but this work is a part of greater budgetary demands that have to do with renovations of schools, the replacement of schools, the new schools. And so I am concerned when it comes to making a recommendation as a bond oversight committee that we're sort of going about this process a little bit backwards, because I believe these priorities were set in terms of what percentages we were going to be spending towards replacements, how we were going to prioritize the spending of the district when it came to capital improvement plans. That was information that was set by the Board of Trustees. And if those priorities are changing, which they can, they've changed before, there's no need for them, or there's no requirement that they can't change again, but that is a district-wide priority that comes back to us to monitor and have oversight for, rather than us being the instigators of such a major change in policy when you take a look at the overall view. So I think, and I think this goes into the bylaws, and we'll get to that conversation a little bit later, but one of those elements that we're talking about in the bylaws is creating that greater communication structure between the Board of Trustees and the Bond Oversight Committee. So I feel like if there's a recommendation to be made, it is towards the overall goals and priorities that they are setting. And if that's the case, I feel like there were a lot of really solid, logical reasons why the capital improvement funding focused the way that it did on complete modernizations, on replacements, and on the strategy that was being pursued. We now also have in the works a facility master planning that would, I'm guessing, at its ultimate goal, be a part of perhaps changing some of those priorities. So to me, I guess I'm at a loss for how we can make a recommendation on such a major board policy change when you think of the overall decision-making that is supposed to be happening with capital improvement funds.
Gotcha. Ms. Williams, you had another question?
Not a question, just a response, Gina, to her comments. I think what we're saying, at least this is what I'm saying, is there's not a decision that we're going to recommend anything. I think that in my mind, at least for me, I just speak for myself, I don't have enough information. And that's why I asked Brandon to come back with costs, labor, resources, all of that, so that we as a committee, because this is going to be the case. I mean, there's always fires to be put out. And if we're a recommending body, sometimes there's recommendations that need to be made to the Board of Trustees that may be outside of that change, that master plan, or that, what you call it, capital improvement plan. So, and I think that falls under our responsibilities. They don't have, at least this is my opinion, and this just goes to the relationship that I have with my trustee who appointed me. I do meet with my trustee regularly. I don't know if everybody else does, but I do. And what I find is my trustee is not aware of a lot of the things that I make her aware of. And she appreciates that, and it helps her do a better job. It allows her to bring up issues and questions on the Board of Trustees that otherwise she wouldn't even ask, because she's not aware. And so sometimes this is information that they don't always get. So I think we need to remember that also, that the trustees can't be all knowing. And I believe that's part of the purpose. And that's why when we get to the bylaws, I will bring that up, because it looks like everything's focused on capital improvement plan. But to me, there's a lot more that our trustees should be looking for us, because they can't be all eyes on everything. So just to sum that up again, my reason for asking Brandon for the recommendations or guidance is so that we are in a position to make a decision or not, or maybe tailor back what we're able to do. But I know we can't continue to do this another summer with the number of schools that we had impacted. We've got to do something, in my opinion.
Here, here.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I'm not actually saying that we don't do anything. What I'm saying is that this was moved to a discussion, from a discussion item last month to an action item this month to actually do exactly that, to make a recommendation. And I feel that we are not prepared to make a recommendation without considering the fuller context of priorities that had already previously been set when it comes to these replacements, and that when it comes to maintenance costs, that is not within our scope of bond funds that are being used to do that maintenance. And if we are going to recommend as a board of school, as a bond oversight committee, that we reprioritize money from capital spending improvement plans to go back to retrofitting these HVAC systems, to acknowledge as a committee, which I think we haven't done yet, is acknowledge that that is a distinct veering away from priorities that had been set as a part of our long-term planning. So I just don't think that we're considering it in the context of the greater conversation, that this is a finite pot of money that had been allocated based on goals and priorities already set. So if we are making a recommendation that we accelerate our HVAC replacement in order to avoid those problems, which I agree are great, I want us to be doing that with the full consideration of what we are saying should be prioritized over decisions that had already been made. It cannot happen in a vacuum. That is my point. And I would agree with you, Yvette, that we do not have the information, the knowledge, or the guidance to make a recommendation based on this information to the Board of School Trustees. However, I would strongly advocate, and as we get to that bylaw conversation, that we do provide that absolute conduit of information, because I think you're right. It's not just what's happening at the individual board members. I think we have a great deal of information that we can routinely be sharing to the Board of School Trustees as a whole that may actually inform some of their decision-making process and come up with a situation where they decide as a Board of School Trustees that we are no longer going to prioritize new buildings or renovations or replacements. We are going to reprioritize modernizations, which is what our priority was. I'm going to say the year wrong, but I believe that was like the 2013, 2014. Am I too early? A little bit later, 16, 11? Thank you, Brandon. That was the priority in 2011, that era. So I think it's being conscientious and conscious of the fact that what we are asking for is a lot more major than, I think, just the idea of, hey, we need these HVAC systems fixed, because what you're talking about is recommending as a bond oversight committee that we alter the allotment of funds that are allocated towards capital improvement, because this all falls under that exact same thing.
Thank you, Gina. Do you have something, Abraham?
Yes. With these scores, Abraham come up for the record, can you elaborate more on how a school gets a 1.24? Like what goes into the maintenance of parts? How does this specific score gets put together?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. So not to sound like a broken record, but it's merely the ratio to replace it versus repair it. So just for sake of easy numbers to provide an example on, say it's a 10-ton HVAC unit. Our assessment team, as well as contracted partners, will go out, evaluate, hey, this component is broken, that component's broken, and $1 is associated with each of those. They also then go to the catalog of that unit type, a 10-ton HVAC unit, if we were to buy an entirely new unit, and they are able to then compare the costs. Hey, the summation of fixing all these components is, say, $100,000, but I can get a new unit for $80,000. That would result in the SCI that you see here today.
Okay, so these with the score of like 1.20, those are the ones with more issues in general, right?
It would be indicative that it's more cost to repair it than it is to replace it. It'd be
Okay.
more efficient to replace it than to repair it.
Okay, so thank you. And then I also understand that, I mean, some of these schools are gonna be in the long plan of being completely replaced and so on. But as much as everybody would like to I'm gonna use an example, but like to purchase a brand new car with zero problems, while you're still driving your old car and your transmission starts to fail, eventually you have to either address the transmission repair or you're gonna be walking. If we're not addressing this, then we're actually opening ourselves up to possible lawsuits with the school district because Nevada, OSHA, and different safety regulations kick in. And if we can't maintain a temperature of 85 degrees for the next season, then teachers will be contacting, the Southern Nevada Health District because now their working conditions have changed and it's not safe. Then we're going to have students that should be focusing on learning, but now it's too hot for them, and now we're going to have kids going to the nurse's office. So this is a Pandora's box. So even though the trustees may not, we're not looking to let's replace every school air conditioning, and I know there's a lot of moving factors there, but sooner or later, either we're going to be walking to school or we're going to have to replace the transmission while we save up money to purchase the new car. So with the with the scores of the CFIs, the 1.0, those are the most problematic. I don't see why can't we come up with a list of schools that are causing issues so that way we can get in front of it. And if we purchase a new unit, that same unit can later be unmantled and moved or reused for a new school. It's not like you just throw it away. So if we spend the money, we can still use it for that same property while it gets rebuilt. We can uninstall it and then that build, so we don't have to. But my biggest concern is summer comes up again and we're gonna have the same issue. So I wanna try to see if this board can give you the proper tools so we can have facilities get in front of the issue while the whole team deliberates, which schools are gonna be replaced, which ones, and that master plan, because our teachers and our students don't have time for 5 years while that school gets replaced. We got to address the issue, and it's hot. And so we want to make sure that our teachers, our staff, our students can just go to a perfect learning environment. And yeah, this conversation might be hard, but I feel that we should have this conversation so that way we can make a recommendation, because it's only a recommendation to the trustees, and so that way they can make a decision and say, hey, we should put it out for a bid. And that way that they can make their decision, but at least have this conversation that says, hey, the Sandy Valley, might need something. Blue Diamond might need attention. I'm just going off the first page off this list, but based off the scores, let's just try to get ahead of it and give your team the proper tools. And if it's funding, let's give that team the funding to address it. So that way we're not having this discussion again in June and we're having teachers and students saying, hey, our classrooms are too hot. So just my opinion.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record. I think I want to address a few things. So first and foremost, yes, or we don't want kids in rooms over 85. So, there are district-wide emergency protocols. If classrooms start approaching those temperatures, they're put elsewhere. So if the transmission's about to break, we put them in a different car, not necessarily a new car, but a different car, right? So they can be at least in a habitable environment. I think if I'm picking up the perception of what Ms. Blackman-Taylor is putting on, I think it's sexy and seductive that new schools sell bonds. It's less seductive when you have to go in and modernize it. And granted, there's statute that requires us to maintain our older buildings, so we're not totally out of the business of modernizing. I think I appreciate the sentiment of Gina that if you guys are going to make a recommendation of an initiative such as this, we would just have to be conscientious of what's going to get taken away. And I don't want to say taken away, but not as high of a priority. So, I mean, we're already talking about, we're entering a facility master plan so that we can properly address a $1.6 billion shortfall of our capital program over a 10-year duration. And I think if we were to say, just for, again, for lack of, or for clarity of a simple example, if we were to say, yes, let's replace these ones and it's in the total of, say, $100 million, we would then have to go to the list of currently funded items and say what 100 million is going to come out, just so we're setting expectations that we can't balance a checkbook, right? So I think that's what I appreciate about Ms. Blackman-Taylor's perspective, as well as the strategic alignment with it, that yes, we took the approach in 19 actually about we would go into schools once, do multiple scopes, so it was less interruption to our schools. They could have an electrical upgrade, an HVAC upgrade, a civil course correction that would say there was a drainage issue on the school site that was unintended when they first opened the school. There's all the things that a school would need from a construction perspective for a 10 to 15 year horizon. We do it once. I mean, that's the Bonanza, that's Cheyenne, that's Cimarron High School is all going on right now, as well as some middle schools and elementary schools. And it's been a successful model, and it approaches more of a preventative maintenance model where we're not having to go in and do these emergency type things, though we acknowledge that emergencies do exist. So I don't think anyone's discounting that these are critical needs. It's just, it is a strategic difference of the types of projects we prioritize. That's the only thing I'd caution within it.
Thank you, Brandon. Go ahead, Mr. Flatt.
Dave Flatt for the record. Brendan, watching Fox 5 News last night, I saw the people on top of one of the roofs of the school stealing air conditioning parts. Is that a common thing that we need to be aware of?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. Thank you, Mr. Flatt, for bringing that up. Park was certainly I don't know if headaches are the right word, but a challenge at the end of the summer. And I will report our maintenance team and our capital team, we opened day one with all ACs operational that day. So, but it is a rising problem that construction sites are having with copper theft in particular, as well as other component replacement or component thefts within the HVAC units, electrical equipment pieces. So it's something we just have to be more cognizant of and securing our construction sites a bit more, but it's something that's probably not going to dissipate. So we're at least aware of it, and we're trying to just deter it as much as we can.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. DeFalco.
I think can sometimes be difficult to find consensus on a group of people when you have 6, 7 people up here. But I also think it's important to do, and the kids are counting on us to do that. And so when we're looking at trying to make a recommendation to the board, it doesn't have to be something drastic that we're recommending doing something that cuts or adds a ton of funding in a specific area. But a recommendation can be, at the Bond Oversight Committee's request, the district gave a presentation. This is the report that the district gave to us, and it's important that you understand the issue that we're all facing as a district, right? I think we should start trying to come up with something that summarizes our work into a recommendation in order for the board to hear about the work that we're doing and the priorities that we think are important for them to know. So as we're talking this through, I just wanted to add that as some context. You know, in particular, one thing that sticks out for me from Brandon's presentation last time, he said that we have $15 billion in need in this issue and only $7.7 billion is funded. I think we take something like that and we give it to the board that the district gave to us so that they're aware of it. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. DeFalco. Ms. Williams.
I just want to bring us back to what are we asking staff to do? Because we could spend all night. Well, it's night for me, by the way, guys. It's 10:30 at night. So when I say night, I know it's morning for you. We could spend the rest of the day going back and forth on this. And I don't think we have enough information from staff to make any decision as to a recommendation. I think we have all agreed that we need more information from staff, some guidance from them, a dollar amount, based on their expertise, based on their resources, based on all these parameters that we need to consider, available funds, what could we put off so that we can address some of these air conditioners for future, those kinds of things. Because, if we're making a recommendation, at least in my viewpoint, I don't want to be part of a recommendation that hasn't been well thought out, well planned, and has all the answers and options for them. That's kind of how I like to flow. And so, and I'm not in a position to make any recommendations or decisions without hearing from staff and getting some guidance from them. So that's kind of where I'm at on that, and I hope we could move forward.
Go ahead, Gina.
Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. Then about to that point, because I think you're right on the money when it comes to the level of detail or at least information that we need in order to effectively make a recommendation of any kind. Then to take Abraham's, Mr. Camejo's 1.2 and above, perhaps the request to staff is what would be the cost assessment to fully replace all the systems in that show a 1.2 above, or get them into that best shape possible, so that we take a segment of the neediest ones according to the data, this data that we have, and we take a look at what we're talking about in terms of cost to prioritize that HVAC replacements, and with a note to what that would do to our other priorities, and what that would do to the timeline of our other construction projects.
Perfect. Thank you, Gina.
Well, some of us aren't on the
That's what
cruise. We're
that's
able
where
to.
I'm trying to get us to. I'm trying to get us
I don't
to,
know if that's.
Can we get to the next step so that then we can get to a recommendation, because we're not ready to make one yet. So.
Go ahead, Abraham.
Abraham Cabell for the record. Gina Black, that's perfect. Yeah, if we can get more information, so that way we can help your team with the tools that they need to get ahead of this issue. Like for example, like Von Tobel. We're not going to want to address Von Tobel because we know that Von Tobel is getting completely rebuilt. But let's say some of the other schools that are not on the future plan to get rebuilt, but they have issues. Maybe we can not buy them a new car, but let's get them a new transmission in time. And so if your team can get us a smaller list of recommendations, so that way we can make a recommendation with cost analysis, and then that way we can make a recommendation so the trustees can say, hey, we should do a bid for this. And then I'm just trying to word it where we can get ahead of the problem and try to put a Band-Aid on this, and especially with the most effective schools.
Brandon McLaughlin.
Well, Brandon, I think it's oh, I'm sorry, Brandon, I didn't step on you, but I think it's important. We got to make sure we put in there, because, this is fiduciary. And so we got to make sure that he is able to find that other money, and where are we going to get it from? So, you know what I mean? That has to come with his guidance. I think it's more than just I think it's a lot more involved. I just want to reemphasize that again.
So Brandon McLaughlin for the record, a few things, and maybe a point of order, but a point of maybe clarification of what I would look for from this committee in this recommendation. I think, because as it stands, I think, yes, it would be a strategic difference. And to Ms. Blackman-Taylor's point, we're charged with what the trustees charge the superintendent with, which is who's my boss. So ultimately, if that's a strategic difference, we can explore that, but that's the direction of the superintendent who I report to. So I think high level, this committee could make recommendation, hey, trustees, we recommend we explore replacing critical HVAC systems. That's a high level. The trustees can hear it. trustees can then opt to direct the superintendent to have staff explore that. And we can then present that. But I think as a committee request and going against the objectives of prior direction would be where we get strayed a little bit. So that would be how I request we go about this.
I support that.
Legal, and just, legal, I just had a question. Instead of directing these recommendations to Brandon, would it be more plausible for like myself and Mr. Camejo attend a trustees meeting with the recommendation coming from the board and giving it directly to the trustees instead of using Mr. McLaughlin as the messenger?
So the committee operates to provide recommendations and advise the Board of School Trustees. So the issue with the bylaws is currently there is no clear mechanism in terms of actually going before the Board of School Trustees through the committee. However, you could do so through the trustee liaison in order to get on the agenda item for the Board of School Trustees and/or through public comment.
Right, but since right now we don't have a liaison, would it be out of, like for myself to attend the next CCSD meeting with a recommendation from this board for the next trustee meeting? Would that be out of line? Since we don't have a liaison.
Through public comment or?
Correct. Yeah, it would have to be through public comment.
Right, because the governance policies for the Board of School Trustees provide how an agenda item is supposed to be added to their agenda, similar to how this committee has bylaws in terms of how things get added to the agenda. So if you're looking to be added on the agenda, that would be through reaching out through the liaison and/or perhaps the trustee that appointed whoever on this committee in order to get on the agenda. Otherwise, yes, to answer your question, this would be a recommendation or advice to be provided to the Board of School Trustees. Another mechanism for doing so could be through public comment.
Thank you. I'd like to hear anybody's opinion if this is a manner you guys want us to pursue, other than Brandon taking the time to do certain things, because it seems like there are certain things that you guys are asking for that are not under the bond oversight CIP. It's more of a facilities management, and which we're going to be told, hey, that's not part of what the BOC is about. So that's why I'm very hesitant going after certain suggestions. But my ears are wide open for whatever you guys want me to present directly to the trustees pertaining to air conditioning repairs, that the district is better prepared for the summer. And what a shorter distance coming from me through public comment at a trustees meeting should get the ball rolling quicker than going through these hoops that we always these walls that we hit all the time trying to get messages across. I'm just looking for opinions if you guys have any.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. Brandon, could you repeat what you said we ought to recommend it one more time?
Yeah, Brandon McLaughlin for the record, I'd say if I'm hearing the committee correctly, it's that you guys want some prioritization to be made toward critical HVAC systems that are underperforming, right? And I think at the stage we're at, the priorities are major mods, comprehensive mods is where we've prioritized dollars. So if there's a directional change of that, and I mean, I'm not underestimating it. This is not an emergency. I'm not saying that. I'm saying these very much are viable things. So if the committee so desires in your purview, you think dollars should be prioritized to critical HVAC systems, you merely have that be a recommendation of the trustees.
Right. I think that's our move, right? We give the report from the district along with that recommendation.
That's where I'm kind of confused, is because these numbers here tell you how bad the situation for each school is. You got the information that you're trying to, I guess you're getting more detail is what you want, but whatever these schools that need to be attacked before the summer comes, that's why I was thinking of myself going in front of the trustees, hey, let's tackle this before, let's be proactive instead of reactive when the time comes, as a recommendation from the board, speaking on public comment. So that's why I'm just a little confused as to these SEIs basically tell you the details. That's what Brandon's explained to us, the details of how bad these schools are in certain locations. So I'm a little confused at how much more detail do you want? Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, if we're going to make a recommendation, I mean, they're relying on us to do our due diligence to make a recommendation, shouldn't our recommendation be thoughtful? I'm not in support of a blanket recommendation that then that without providing our board with the information they need to consider a recommendation.
But that's my point.
It
These
seems,
numbers,
yeah, it just seems like, what is our purpose then? I mean, it doesn't seem very professional. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. It doesn't seem very thorough. It seems like we're not doing our job and kind of dumping it on them. That's how it feels to me. And it seems to me that that facilities should be able to give us some guidance on which units should we prioritize based on the budget, based on what funds are available, what resources they have available to address that. And then of course the Board of Trustees would then decide with probably meeting with facilities and having conversations with superintendent and staff, but at least we're coming to them with thoughtful recommendation. It just seems, it doesn't sound
which
like.
again, that's where I feel that these numbers give you the details as to how bad each school is. That's where these numbers range from
Yeah, but while we're
1.25
doing
down to 0.
that's something they already know.
Correct. Go ahead.
So what, I mean, they don't need you to go to a meeting to tell them something they already know. They need you to go to the meeting and give them a recommendation.
And that's why I asked if the recommendation is something that I should do through public comment. So, and it doesn't seem like everybody's on the same page as to how detailed this thing should be, because some board members feel like we're asking for things that don't pertain to what our job is, and some board members feel like, you know, we're just overstepping our bounds when it comes to certain aspects of these questions.
Well, if our responsibility is oversight of the bond dollars, and when you talking about using bond dollars, then it falls under our purview. Or am I wrong?
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I think I'm considering what Brandon's response was to that proposal about getting that more direct cost comparison, was that essentially the response was there is already existing direction from the Board of Trustees and the superintendent. And so to prepare a report that provides us with that cost analysis or looks to prioritize modernization, if I understand or I'm characterizing Brandon's comment correctly, what I'm hearing is that staff would see that directive, that ask, as going against the already previously stated priorities of the Board of School Trustees and the superintendent. And so he would not be able to take that directive action and that cost comparison action without more express permission, or permission's perhaps not real, directive from the Board of School Trustees and the superintendent. Before I go
see.
too much farther,
Okay.
Brandon,
I understand better.
did I clarify, did I reiterate that to your satisfaction?
Yeah, Brandon McLeod for the record is exactly it. 2019 provided for the comp mod strategy where we went in with multiple scopes. So if we're going back to single scope, that's just a major difference from what we currently, how we package projects, how we solicit feedback in obtaining projects.
So here's the area, this is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record, trying to get us to the point where we're able to move forward, especially given sort of the time, is one, as challenging as it is, I think part of the hangup is that this board and this capital improvement plan is really not designed for quick, short-term action. There is a mechanism within CCSD and facilities that is actually designed to do that, and I think that as a bond oversight committee, I mean, we can. I'm uneasy making a recommendation to change such priorities that were established for good reason, particularly as an immediate response to a very serious problem. particularly when there are other long-term development plans in place that will actually dictate the course of that conversation and allow for that gathering of information that, we might actually hear through this master facility process that the community wants us to emphasize HVAC systems or modernization, but I think that is part of a larger conversation. To me, where this gets reflected is if we move on to that, we still have construction, but both of these issues, I think, are ones that can be addressed through the bylaws conversation, where we are talking about setting up a more regular sort of communication to the Board of Schools trustees, where these reports can actually be shared as separate from public comment, that gives Al the opportunity to say, we are hearing as a bond oversight committee that there is a concern about these as an emergency situation that is leading to I don't even know that we could say recommendation, because I don't know that I'm in favor of changing already the stated priorities, but we think that it should be a part of the consideration when you're talking about changing priorities, or that at least we can be directed to get those cost analysis through the board and through the superintendent, and so that maybe it comes back to our board in that manner. But I think it is important to set up that mechanism that gives us that voice and use and purpose at the Board of Schools trustees level.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. I don't think what Brandon has offered to us as a possible recommendation is changing priorities. In fact, I think we've had a long conversation here, and I'd like to offer a motion. Brandon, could you say one more time, for the third time so we all can hear it for the record, exactly what you think or you suggested earlier when you were asked we could recommend to the board?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. If I'm hearing between what, the multiple voices, like the simple ask would be if exploring an initiative to improve critically failing HVAC systems is of interest for bond dollars to address, that the trustees direct the superintendent to direct staff to explore that.
I make a motion to make that recommendation to the board.
We have a motion on the floor to make that recommendation to the board. Trustees.
Abraham Camil for the record, I second that motion.
We have a second from Mr. Abraham Camejo. All those in favor, please say aye.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Before the motion, public comment.
I'm sorry. Is there any public comment when it pertains to 2.04? Hearing none. All those in favor, I'm sorry.
2.05.
I'm sorry, 2.05, system level condition index for meeting ventilation and air conditioning recommendations. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to 2.06, construction cost trend recommendations. Mr. Brandon McLaughlin.
Again, Brandon McLaughlin for the record. This was a presentation last month highlighting the material and labor increases we've experienced predominantly since 2021, which is our last CIP recommendation and approval by the trustees. Again, we brought this back for possible action as a recommendation to the trustees.
Any questions from the board pertaining to construction cost trends?
Matthew DeFalco for the record. The part that jumps out to me that I think we should consider passing along here to the full board is directly in the minutes. I'll read it. This presentation addressed the substantial increase in construction costs, which have been steadily rising since 2020, driven by a multitude of factors, including material shortages, labor constraints, and an increased demand. These trends have had a significant impact on projects funded through bonds, affecting budget allocations and timelines. Brandon, do you think that would make sense to recommend to the full board based on what we were presented?
Brandon McLaughlin for the record. I don't know what the recommendation would be within that for them to take action on would be my only ambiguity I'd want clarified. So like the past one, it was, okay, we want you to take or explore X. I don't know what the exploration or action by them would be of your recommendation.
So I think we talked through that, but this is what I, at least myself, see as a serious issue that I think the board needs to take up and have a conversation about. And what you've told us is that everything is costing a lot more money. And I understand that a lot of people know that, and the board probably knows that, but it's important that they hear directly from the Bond Oversight Committee that we've had a presentation from staff and we've discussed this, and it's important for them to know and hear directly from us that this is affecting our projects that are funded through bonds, and you guys need to look into this.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think if I was going to make a recommendation, I would probably recommend that the board would consider to do what they're already doing, which is engage like some third-party consultants that can take an unbiased approach at reviewing the master plan. So I guess I'll turn that around and say that I don't think I would recommend them doing anything further than what they've already started, and then we let that process play out.
Are there any other comments pertaining to this construction cost trends? Mr. Camilo.
Aaron Cabell, for the record, I would just encourage to continue to explore more options to bring in more people to bid on all these projects. Smaller businesses, local businesses, and then maybe try to analyze the amount of paperwork that is needed to help qualify our contractors and different trades so that they can do more business, so that way your team and can do maybe provide more so the more people can enter into the bidding process versus having some of these bids that if we get 2 or 3, that's a miracle. So that would be just my recommendations to continue the advocacy and the education portion of helping others that would like to do business to welcome to try to teach them and to bring them into the vendors circle, I guess you can say, and then that way we can try to tackle this increase of construction.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Ms. Williams.
I just want to make a comment, not really any direction, but I don't think there's much we're going to be able to do as far as these rising costs. I mean, it's happening throughout the world. And my husband's in construction, and I asked him after reading this report, what does he see? And he said it costs just in the last year alone, he's seen a 50% increase just in this last year. Just, in general terms. Depending on what it is, of course, it's going to change. But if you were to take in kind of overall costs, it's about 50% additional 50% increase just in the past year. It's crazy what's happening. So I don't know that more people bidding is the answer. I don't know that that's going to really change anything. I think whoever does the jobs, they're going to be spending more to do the job, and it's going to end up costing the district more money to do the work. And so. I think the conversation really needs to go to more about how do we better manage our funds, or how do we create more longevity of the resources that we create so that they last longer. Maybe the discussion needs to be around increasing the bond. Maybe $10 billion isn't enough. Maybe we need to get to 15 billion next go round. So maybe that needs to be part of a recommendation, is how do we secure more funds in a future bond?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any more comment or questions pertaining to construction cost trends? Go ahead, Matt.
Matthew DeFalco for the record. Chad, is there a way to put something together based on what you were just talking about? And it made me think of our previous conversation. I think Brandon actually talked about that there was already a series of recommendations and that some of them had already been implemented So keeping that in mind, based on what you were just saying, Chad, is there something we can put together that we can recommend to the board?
I don't think so. And I say that because I think that the process we need to understand is what's going to be coming from the consultants that have been engaged. And I completely agree with Ms. Williams' comment about better using funds and you know, finding efficiencies and, you know, everything under you know, under the scope of possibilities that I think we need to have more time to understand from the consultants that have been engaged. So no, I don't think so. But if you have something, I'd be happy to hear it.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, go ahead. Robert, feel free. I don't have anything in particular, just think it's important for us to see if there's something we can all agree on.
I'll just
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I'll just, Rob Gers for the record. I just want to add just 2 cents as far as what could be done, and I think there's a lot that could be said about delivery method. So if we're doing a lot of schools that or let's say prototype that we're designing, I mean, I firsthand witnessed in a room architects, contractors, and the school district working together to resolve a very difficult problem of how do we afford these schools. So I think the CMAR delivery method for, you know, unknown things, where we bring all minds together, makes a big difference. And once it becomes a prototype, then, you know, if it's a rinse and repeat type of thing, then, you know, going out to bid makes a lot of sense. So I think delivery method could offer a lot of potential for savings for these things.
Thank you, Robert. Is there any other comments, questions pertaining to construction cost trends from the board? How about public comment? Is there any public comment pertaining to construction cost trends? Hearing none, we are going to move on to 2.07, Bond Oversight Committee Bylaw Review.
Al, please, if I may, before we move on from
Go ahead, Brandon.
206, so we're taking no action on 206.
I'm open for suggestions from any of the board if there's any actions that you guys feel that the facility should take.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor to the for the record. To Chad's point, you know, I don't think that there's anything in here that would merit a special action. However, as we move into our bylaws conversation, keeping in mind that there are mechanisms that we are trying to set up that would allow for us to include information on presentations like this, where there may not be a directed action or recommendation, but that it is important enough information that we feel like the public and the Board of School Trustees should hear. So I mean, I think this is the sort of report that is tailor-made for the kind of condition that we were trying to come up with in the bylaws. So no, for my own sake, I would recommend no action on 2.06.
Yeah, I'm not saying you need to take action for the sake of no action. I just wanted to be absolutely clear that we're not taking action on this, just so we can log that properly.
Do we have to vote to take no action?
No.
Legal? We don't have to vote.
There's a motion to.
No.
So if there's no suggestions or recommendations, I would just say that there will be no action at this point for 2.06. Ms. Williams?
Yeah, I think because in our agenda, it says no action, it's just a discussion. So I don't think we can take action on it anyway.
It says for
So-
possible action on it.
Oh,
That's
the
right.
agenda I have, it doesn't say that, it just says presentation and discussion. I don't know, maybe mine's out of date.
It's on the next page. It's kind of split up.
No, we don't need to.
No,
Unless there's a motion.
But it,
unless there's a motion,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to see an action, please speak up now, but at this point, it's looking like no
well,
action.
there are a few areas that I did want to discuss further, but that can be done at a later time. I am looking at the time, and I know our meeting's are 2.5 hours. We're at 2.5, and I know we have some other business. So if there's something we're gonna talk about at a later date, that's fine.
Yeah, we can always bring it up in a future agenda items if needed, but
Okay.
yeah, I think time is, and there's people already telling me they only have so much time left. So let's move on to 2.07, Bond Oversight Committee bylaw review. Please, the floor is open to anybody that needs to speak on this. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I wanted to say first, just in case it changes anyone's thoughts on the discussion, I think I was the proponent in the last meeting of not tabling this based on board changes and liaison changes. And I think my comment was quoted as, I don't think we have a lame duck board of trustees at this point. I think my opinion's changed on that from the perspective of the liaison not being present, and specifically because it was the individual that was our liaison that was guiding our direction and our conversation on making these changes. So I think it was Ms. Williams who attempted to take a motion at the last meeting to table this for a number of months until there was new personnel, new direction. I would be in favor of that at this point.
Go ahead, Gina.
Here, here.
This is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. So I think there's actually a way to, I think, move forward, but in a specific way. So one, this is a discussion item. This was purposely not done as an action item, so we cannot take action on this item today. Just as a making sure that we understand, I think it was designed to create more of a conversation and a decision making for future decision making, not today. But and Al can maybe speak to whatever sort of emails that he has gotten, but in some of our conversations following up on some of the questions that we had asked, given that last meeting, there was a great deal of discussion over the appropriate venue or hearing back from that clarification regarding GP 14 and GP 15 and how that applied or impacted us. We did not get a clarification on that particular point. So to that end, that is still something that is up in the air. So what I would like to have a conversation about is to see if there is any interest in sort of going back, not to square one, but to the ideas where we leave out the things that had the most contentious items in them, but look to capture those elements of presentations to the Board of School Trustees and other items that generally this committee saw as pluses, trying to add them in and have us vote on that as a bylaws recommendation so that we can show that we have made these changes. We can give ourselves the tools that we need to make the presentations to the Board of School Trustees that we wish to do. And then we tackle the more contentious areas when we actually do have that sort of more direct guidance from the Board of School Trustees, knowing that it is going to take them a few months to likely get their feet under them. They don't even get sworn in until January, and I'm guessing the bylaws of the Bond Oversight Committee are not high, as much as we like to know our importance, but I don't think they're probably high on it. And given that we have yearly expectation to work on the bylaws, this would be a perfect thing to then bring back in more detail as we get into the next year, but that we give ourselves those tools that increase that communication now.
Ms. Williams.
I'm not quite sure what those items might be that you're referring to, Gina.
Sure, I can tell you.
That were agreeable and so forth. But if we're going to have that discussion, and we're going to move anything forward today, then I would like to have the opportunity to talk about some of the things that I talked about at the last meeting that I had concerns with that are still in this current revision of bylaws.
Hi, Yvette, this is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. It is a discussion-only item. We cannot take any action on it today. So any comments or notes, this version did not change one iota from last month's version. It was just brought back strictly the way that it is. There's no different language. All of the discussion that happened is still relevant discussion. I am speaking particularly of there were quarterly presentations that were added to the Board of School Trustees from the chair of the Bond Oversight Committee. That was one of the things that was universally, as far as I understand, no one had an exact objection to that. And I guess if someone does, they can bring that up. But there were, I mean, ultimately, I think what we're talking about is going back to a much more streamlined version that gets rid of almost all of the new language, except for trying to create a mechanism for connection to the Board of School Trustees.
So let me just make sure I'm hearing you. So what you're suggesting is that we go back to our original I'm just going to refer to it as a four-pager bylaws, and basically add in the mechanism to be able to interact with the Board of Trustees. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, that is what I am proposing, yes, that we take a look at that and that we then put it as an action item for our next item so that we have something that we can pass as a renewed bylaws that gives us the mechanism that we all have been talking about wanting to have, and then revisit more serious changes when we actually have a Board of School Trustees liaison and more specific guidance regarding some of these legal opinions.
So are there any additional from what we heard from you last month, Ms. Williams, or like I say, we already have on the table right now, we're suggesting to just table this similar to what you suggested last time, but there's not going to be any action, but if there's any comments that you want to put on the record, that's what we're open to at this point.
I would like to put on the record under Article 2, Purpose A, where it refers to including equity, diversity, inclusion of renewable energy goals set by board related to the execution of the capital improvement plan. I strongly feel that language should go up under Section 1, under purpose, so that it is inclusive of all of those A through whatever alphabet, what is that, A through F? No, A through I. A through I. So I do want to just state that, because that is something that I did take a note of in just reviewing what my discussion was last month, that I kind of missed that. It really should go up to the top as part of the purpose. And then, but I'm all in support of tabling the bylaws, until, February, as the new board gets sworn in January. And so I'm fine with tabling whatever the committee whatever the committee wants to do, I'll be supportive of.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Matt DeFalco.
Couple quick things. Number one, I think that our executive committee or whoever it is that is behind the scenes working on this draft should make some changes based on their extensive conversation that we had at our last meeting. And I'm not sure why we didn't do that, because we talked a lot about this. So I think we should go back and make some changes, especially based on what Yvette was offering. And number two, I also suggest that group meets individually with our newly elected board members, because I think that we are building a consensus here that it's important to bring them into this conversation and to see where they're at with some of the changes that we're offering.
Go ahead, Chad.
I think, I agree with you. I think we're probably thinking something similar. My issue, and the reason why I changed my thought process on this is that I think the liaison is that tool for us at this point to have the board's ear or interaction, and we don't have that. So while I agree, I think that even a change is as simple as or as singular as, how can we have contact or document a mechanism to have contact with the board, I think we need the liaison to be part of that process. So again, that's my thought on why, like, I'm in support of holding this discussion. And I know there's no action to take, but I'm in support of holding this until a liaison is available to be part of this committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'm willing to make that motion again, if that's appropriate, Mr.
It's not
Chairman.
appropriate, Ms. Williams. There's no actions going to be taken on this, strictly comment as of today. So
Okay,
this is
all righty,
something.
thank you.
Is there any other comments or suggestions pertaining to Bond Oversight Committee bylaws review? Is there any public comment pertaining to 2.07? In which is, I do have a public comment on this, on knowing that it's not an action item, but we are open to public comment, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some things to distribute, if I may.
Those can be uploaded as part of the minutes.
Okay. Since last month's meeting, I did take the opportunity to go through the proposed revisions, and I've created a list. One of the handouts is a list of some 34 items that I think need to be considered for changes before there's any major revision to the bylaws. Obviously, in 3 minutes, I can't go over all 34 of them, so I just want to highlight the three. One has already been mentioned, is liaisons. I still believe that the deletion of the liaisons is a total mistake. I don't think you can do your job without direct interaction with staff, and you can't do that as an entire committee. And therefore, I think the liaisons are very important. The other two things that I would ask you to look at is the provisions that have been proposed for how you, as members of the Bond Oversight Committee, are selected and appointed. I don't understand why. I do understand why there would need to be a change, given a change in the makeup of the board. That you now have the 7 voting members and you have 4 non-voting members, I guess is the correct terminology, but there appears to be a proposal that you'd have 2 totally different selection methods, and I don't understand that. If the concept of 4 regional representatives on the Bond Oversight Committee, if those regions are intended to correspond to the geographic boundaries of the municipalities represented by the 4 non-voting members of the board, why not just have those 4 non-voting local governments appoint a member to the Bond Oversight Committee? And the last thing that I would bring up is the staggered lengths. The reason that there was a staggered length, term length for bond oversight committees is exactly the same as is for the board members. You don't want all of the members of the board or all of the members of the committee leaving at the same time and all of your institutional knowledge walking out the door with them. So my other recommendation is that you keep that language in there about staggered term lengths. The other thing to pass out was strictly a letter that I was asked to distribute by Ms. Haldeman, who could not be here at today's meeting. She apologized for not being here, but I will leave those for distribution to you. My last comment is, just again, from a historical perspective, the Bond Oversight Committee used to have a standing item on the agenda of the Board of School Trustees, or a report from the Bond Oversight Committee. You just simply need to go back that. And if you try to do something as public comment, there's no way for the board to take action on it at that meeting. So you're going to delay for another month. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Well, I value your final point there. That's definitely something that we do need to improve communication between this board and the trustees. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to 2.08, questions on or removal of items on motions, liaisons, and taskings. Again, analysis of district cost savings and options to provide access to a larger population of students. I think this is yours, Ms. Williams. Is there anything to report on or update on this at all?
No, and I guess that I guess what I probably need to do is have a conversation with Gina at the CTE department. And because with this master plan, this might very well get addressed. So let me have a conversation with her if you don't mind, and at our next meeting, I can better inform.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any questions pertaining to the liaisons and taskings and motions for Ms. Williams? Go ahead, Matt, did you have something? Or do you want to report on
I
something?
generally agree with Ms. Williams' take. I believe this item would make sense within the facility master plan, and I'm just trying to clear off motions and tasking, so.
So put this in the facility master plans instead of motions and taskings, is your
Yeah.
suggestion? Okay. Thank you, Brandon. All right, is there any public comment pertaining to 2.08? Hearing none, we're going to move on to 2.09, future agenda planning. Floor is all yours if anybody has any suggestions for any future agendas. Other than we did suggest going dark in December. That's usually what we do historically. So unless somebody has any other ideas about December, right now is the time to speak, but our next meeting will be, so this future agenda will be for our January meeting. Go ahead, Abraham, you have something?
No, just to clarify, so no meeting for December and next meeting would be scheduled for January, correct?
Historically, that's what we need, but legal, do we have to have a motion to cancel December's meeting?
Is it currently on schedule?
Historically, it's never been on the schedule, so.
Then no.
Okay, thank you. All right, then, so any future agenda items for January? Go ahead, Gina.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I would like to get that project tracking, the financial report that we once had. It's now been several months, so I'd like an update from the project tracking report on expenses since the last time it was brought to the meeting. Thank you.
You understand what she's talking about there, Brandon, or you want to comment on that?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, I do. Why it hasn't been brought forward is I think it was a huge corral of any interests of the day. And I say that lightly, but I think the information you want to obtain from it is I would recommend you guys put forward, we want a financial update on encumbrances and incomes of the bond. So a financial update rather than the tracker exactly.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I mean, the benefit, and I believe the financial encumbrance is definitely an important part of that to keep track, especially since, well, it's just an important part to keep track. But the value that I saw as part of the project tracker was that it did, in some cases, illustrate this exact point that we were talking about with the raised construction costs. As we talk about that per project, it puts it on the public record in a way that the public can see what some of these budget changes are. I can understand and appreciate the sense that it may have felt like a pile-on when it came to the discussion of that, and yet I still feel as if that sort of visual information, I think, is really important, especially as a reminder of what projects are ongoing and the costs that we're incurring because of those projects.
Anything else to add to that, Brandon, or are you good? All right, do we have any other items that we'd like to suggest for future agenda up in January? Hearing none, is there any public comment when it comes to 2 points? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Do I need to make a motion?
Probably wouldn't hurt. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Gina Blackman Taylor for the record. I make a motion that we include the project tracker and the financial encumbrances at the next Bond Oversight Committee meeting.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Is there
I'll
time,
second.
is there time for discussion?
Yvette Williams, second.
Ms. Williams seconded, and now we're open for discussion on this.
I just wanted to clarify, is that what Brandon asked we put on here? Was that worded the right way that Brandon just asked?
Brandon McLaughlin, for the record, I fear it's subjective, and I don't say that, like, I don't want to fulfill the request. I have a feeling I know what you want to see. It's the spreadsheet, right?
Correct.
But I think I'd more so go for the information because then we can find more accurate representations of it aside from a spreadsheet on a computer, right? So I think what I'm hearing you is we would like financial information per project and how staff chooses to present that. We'll find the best way we believe to present that, but I just don't want the expectation it's going to be a spreadsheet of lines and lines and lines of projects dating back for now 9 years.
Right.
Just if I hear it right, you want financial information.
Correct. This is Gina Blackman-Taylor for the record. I do want that financial information. My motion does not restrict it to the format in which it comes in, so I don't think I need to change the motion. I appreciate the clarification so that we understand and our expectations for what information that we are getting, with the caveat of that once we have that information in that conversation, if we find that that format is challenging, that we can still have a conversation about format at that time. But I don't think I need to change the motion because I believe the nature of the information is not a part of the motion, the format. But I appreciate you clarifying.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
I'm sorry, did we give an opportunity for public comment?
No, we did not. Is there any public comment when it comes to this particular motion?
Agenda item.
Agenda item 2.09, future agenda planning. Any public comment? Hearing none. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to 3.01, public comment period. Is there any public comment out there? Hearing none. I did want to make a point before we go on to the final thing. I value the point that Mr. Smith said that historically that the Bond Oversight Committee did have agenda items on the trustees. I was never aware of that. So hopefully if that's something that we could probably work into the bylaws, maybe for future discussion, to where we do have a say-so on the agenda as a regular order of business for the trustees. I think that would be helpful to kind of close the gap of communication that we have right now with the trustees. So anything to improve the communication that we lack at this point would be valid in my opinion. So other than that, we're going to move on to the final item, adjournment. I need a motion to adjourn the meeting today.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor.
Abraham Kamel for the record, I second that.
Abraham, second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, everyone.